I do have some guests here. Michael, do we have any late breaking news about our matchup with Pumas? Yay or nay? All right, welcome back everybody to BGFC Weekly, where we discuss all things related to our Golden Lions. I'm Jimmie and I'm your host. And this week, I really want to take a dive into our final playoff standing and just see how things have shaken out so far this year in the Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division. Now, I specifically say so far because we've had some very late breaking news. So over the weekend, Pumas Premier actually tied with Iterbide FC 3-3. That then gives them a pathway to still potentially make the playoffs and is going to force a matchup between BGFC and Pumas sometime this week prior to the beginning of the playoffs, which will start on Saturday. Now, most of you all are probably thinking, oh my gosh, it's really late in the week. When is this game going to happen? So we pre-record these podcasts. They don't come out we don't record them on the same day that they come out. So don't worry about that. More information on that game should be on our social media at this point. However, unless I get some even more late breaking news, all that I know at time of recording is BGFC will play Pumas Premier, that team from Mayfield, at some point this week, most likely on Tuesday or Wednesday. But you'll hear in a little bit, Wednesday could be a little bit of a hiccup. So let's dive on into the table thus far. So carrying forward from what we talked about last week, we've still got our top 5 playoff teams. Nothing has changed there. The order has changed a little bit because of some action that happened and some that didn't. But still, number 1, Beeman United. They've been there all year. I said it weeks ago. They won the regular season championship several weeks ago, like literally maybe even a month ago before they went on their long break. Pretty much when BGFC beat Iterbide here in Bowling Green, Beeman was the most benefited team from that because they got to have the advantage on points because they only had one draw, was their only blemish this past season. That bumps us to second place, which is now Iterbide with 22 points and a goal differential of plus 22. They picked up 4 points over the weekend after knocking off Nashville Knights 3-1. And then in really a surpriser, Pumas Premier, as I talked about earlier, they tied 3-3, a late comeback to get the draw. And with that, that forced that extra game earlier that I mentioned. So Pumas, having only played 9 games, having 22 points, puts them currently in second. However, they may also have to make up that 10th game, which would again be against Pumas. And this time, that game would be in Mayfield. So we don't quite know what could happen. With another victory, Iterbide would then have 25 points and would have the advantage over Beeman, as Iterbide beat Beeman earlier this season. So while they're currently in second, if the league forces them to play that extra game against Pumas, we don't know what might happen there. That pushes down to third place, which is your BGFC Golden Lions, 19 points on a plus 22 goal differential. And we picked up 3 points over the weekend, but we didn't play any games. Elizabethtown Ignite forfeited that matchup against us, therefore granting us the 3 extra points. And again, as I mentioned, the league is forcing us to play Pumas to get to that 10th game. And again, check our other social media sites while you're listening to this podcast, just so you know exactly when and where that match is and to see the results. While the top 3, really the top 4, probably won't change, BGFC especially, we're pretty much locked in that third place because even with a victory, well, no, when we're thinking about the numbers, 19-3, what is that, folks? 22. No, yeah, 20, 21, 20. Yeah, okay, I can't do math. I have dyscalculia. Leave me alone. That 3 points would give us the second place because we beat Iterbide. So there's a lot of things that still could happen here. Moving down to fourth place, we have Deportivo Jalisco, 19 points, and they have no more games. They have been done for a few weeks now, so they are pretty well locked into the playoffs. I don't think there's any way, I'm not great at math, but I'm not that bad. I don't think there's any way that Deportivo gets knocked out. There's no other way for them to make up any extra points, so they seem locked in fourth place, which would host the 4-5 matchup starting on Wednesday of this week. So it would be June 15th. So Deportivo, congratulations. You're going to get that extra home game. You're going to play in the 4-5 matchup, but then you've got to go on the road to play Beeman. But we'll talk about that in a minute. And the team that is on the absolute hot box right now, this team has to be sweating like a certain person in church every week, is Nashville Knights. They have 15 points with a goal differential of plus 10. However, they blew a huge chance this past weekend because they lost to Iterbide. That could have not only given them a potential home game, but could have at least more solidified their chances of staying in the playoffs. But they didn't. Now there's a chance that we'll talk about that in a minute, but there's a chance that they may wind up being outside of the playoffs. So just to complete the table, Midwest Hooligans, 6, 11 points. Pumas, 7th, 10 points. And like I mentioned, they have a chance with potentially 2 extra games remaining, both against BGFC and Iterbide, that they could find themselves with 2 wins in those games in the playoffs. It's an absolutely crazy scenario for a team to cobble together basically 3 wins and a draw in a 2-week period and then have to go into the playoffs. But here they are, Pumas having a chance to dive into the playoffs. 8th place, Elizabethtown Ignite, currently only 1 point with goal differential of negative 27. And then closing out the table is still Coptic Nashville City, 0 points, negative 72 goal differential. I can't get over that. Like, that's just insane. Negative 72? When BGFC went and played at Midwest Hooligans, which, as we talked about last week with Coach Evan, that was a loss. Some of their fans really questioned, how did BGFC beat Coptic by 18 goals? It's because they're a bad team. They're a really bad team. You don't lose to 18-0 to us, multiple other score lines over 10 plus to 0. They're just bad. So they bring up and they close out our table for this week. Now I want to transition a little bit, and I want to talk about kind of how these teams, how their season has gone so far. And I want to start this conversation with going a little bit deeper into those non-playoff teams. So I'm going to start back up at number 6 and kind of work my way back through the bottom half of the table before jumping into how the playoff teams will look. So first and foremost, Midwest Hooligans, they're in 6th, nothing they can do about it. First year in the league from Evansville, Indiana. And, if you think about where they are as a new team, barely missing the playoffs, not too terrible of a negative goal differential. They had some good upsets over BGFC, and they played tough against some of the other opponents. It's not a bad first year. But for me personally, growing up as a kid in Western Kentucky, Evansville was our big city. That was the place that we went for the mall. That's where we went for concerts. So fun fact, if you're ever wondering what my first concert I ever attended was, and man, is this a doozy. This also tells you a little bit about who I am and the era I grew up in. My first concert was in Evansville. And it was actually a Nickelback concert. And I can't believe that I just admitted that on this podcast. But Nickelback was my first concert in Evansville. So Evansville was always the place to go to see shows, to go out to have a nice evening, to eat at a fancy chain restaurant. It was the place where you took somebody on a date, for prom, for so many great celebrations. Evansville was that place for so many families in Western Kentucky and in Southern Indiana. They even have a zoo. Shout out to the Evansville Mesker Park Zoo. If you haven't been, you should really go. It's actually a legit nice zoo. I remember one time I broke my leg playing American football, and my dad had to push me around in a wheelchair because we went to the zoo. And that was a fun time for me, not so much for him. So as somebody that grew up in the area looking at Evansville, I always wanted them to be something. To us, they were like a smaller Louisville or like a slightly larger Bowling Green. But the one thing they were always missing was sports. I mean, yes, they had their University of Evansville teams, the men's and women's basketball teams being the main attraction for that, but it never captured the region like a team could. So to me, a medium-sized city like Evansville needs a semi-professional to professional team to help to continue that city grow, and that's where Hooligans comes in. And as far as the name goes, I'm not a huge fan. Just being honest, Hooligans. I know that you all listen and you all help promote this podcast. I'm not a big fan. The Midwest is too unspecific on an unidentifiable location. Evansville is really the very bottom of the Midwest, so it's not even quite accurate to what you would call the Midwest. So I would, of course, suggest something that's more relatable to the city or the region. So you could look at Evansville FC, Evansville United, something like that would be better. Even Evansville Hooligans sounds better to me than Midwest Hooligans. But other than that, they also need to kind of work on their facilities. While the Evansville school systems, soccer fields that we played at and that they play at for all of their games, it has some benefits both in the city. It has a lot of drawbacks. So per UPSL standards, that area is not up to standard. The field did not have any locker rooms. The PA system was not that great, and it was really hard to hear. But maybe I'm being a little too picky. Maybe. So those are just some things that I think they could really work on. Work on the name. Either work on building locker rooms or find a better facility to have those locker rooms on site. If you look at the University of Evansville field, it's a great field, but it's also on a university campus that probably doesn't allow drinking and would really take away from that tailgating atmosphere that they currently have. So maybe their best option is just to build something there on the EVSC soccer fields. When you're talking about that first season, again, they went 3-5-2, so 3 wins, 5 losses, 2 draws of their 10 matchups. So they had key wins against BGFC, like I mentioned, Elizabethtown Ignite, and Coptic Nashville City, which everybody beat by like 100-0. They were very competitive in the games that they did lose, except for that 6-0 loss to Iterbide later in the year. So all in all, Hooligans, a great first season in the Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division. And I really look forward to creating a rivalry with this team. I think BGFC and Hooligans could be a really great competitive rivalry. Call it something like the I-24 Rumble, or I don't know, the I-24 Derby or something like that. But let's switch gears now, going to 7th place, Pumas Premier. Again, this team still has some life in them and still could wind up in the playoffs. I know Coach Evan has a friend that's on the coaching staff, but that's not going to stop me this week. Coach Evan's not here, and I will do some criticizing of the organization. So to me, again, growing up in the area, Paducah was always that other city in Western Kentucky. And then for those listening on the audio version of this, I did put air quotes around other. I never really had a reason to go there. There was not a whole lot of attractions there. They did have a decent mall, some chain restaurants, but not a whole lot. But today, Paducah is a growing city on the Ohio River. They have a lot of investors into downtown Paducah, and they have fully changed the downtown riverfront area. It went from something that was where nobody wanted to go to where now it's a desirable location. And, for Paducah, I really hope that they can build a stadium down there for a soccer team. If you're looking at cities in Kentucky and Tennessee that are growing, Paducah has to be up there on that list with Bowling Green and some other areas. But, I just think Pumas specifically has too much going on. And I really would caution BGFC to watch Pumas and to take things away from them, to what to not do, not to expand too quickly. So here's some examples. Pumas Premier, they have both a men's and women's semi-professional team, both playing the UPSL, but they also have a boys and girls youth academy. And I don't know if, Coach Chili and some of the folks that work down there, if they have the staff to help support it, but they've got a lot going on and they're spread very thin on the management and coaching side. So, I know Coach Evan, if you're listening to this, please work with your partner over there at Pumas and take things away from them that we can do differently here in Bowling Green to make sure that we are getting the support that we need from the community. And the other big thing that I want to take away from Pumas is y'all got to figure out where you want to play. If you're supposed to be Paducah's team, please, dear God, stop playing 45 minutes to the south in Mayfield. This literally drives me insane. Mayfield, after everything they went through last December, deserves better, and so does Paducah. Y'all don't need to be splitting time between the two. Paducah Tillman High School has the Walter Jetson soccer field. McCracken County has a beautiful brand new sports complex with soccer fields. Heck, Lonoke still has some great soccer complexes that all would be a better fit for Pumas rather than driving down to Mayfield. Now, maybe there's some kind of agreement in place between the cities, or, Pumas just doesn't have the opportunity to play at some of these other facilities. I'd really like to know. So if Coach Chili or somebody on reading ahead here, somebody on the Pumas Premier staff wants to reach out and let us know, I would love to have you on. I would love to really stoke the rivalry between the two here. We can call it the Western Kentucky Derby. I think that's got a great ring to it. Let's create a championship trophy. But so far, their biggest season highlights are 2 draws, both very surprising, but against Beeman United and Iterbide. And they've got another chance here, or 2 more chances here, coming up this week at some point where they are going to play Iterbide and BGFC, where they could find themselves in the playoffs. And best of luck to them. Moving now down to 8th place, Elizabethtown Ignite. Look, I'm not going to spend too much time on them here. They're a good organization. They have got a lot going on. They've had some cancellations and some forfeits this year. But overall, they are still a relatively competitive team. Not quite as competitive as like Midwest Hooligans, but they are still relatively competitive in a lot of their matchups. Their only win this year came as a 4-1 victory over Coptic. E-Town is such a growing town and has so much love for soccer in that city that they can support 2 teams. They can support E-Town, Ignite, and Deportivo. I really want them to figure out and make changes from this year, because I do want this to be another big rivalry. The I-65 Classic, Central Kentucky Showdown, something like that. Let's, again, just like with Pumas, let's create this rivalry. Let's work together to make this something that everybody in the state has to pay attention to, not just fans of both teams. So finally, we're going to drop down to Coptic Nashville City FC. Again, I talked about them earlier. I don't want to spend a whole lot more time today talking about them, but they're a team in Nashville that has very little to no talent. They don't even really belong in this league. Their talent is not good enough. The UPSL needs to look into this team and needs to make something happen with them, because this is
UPSL never posted any of their scores.
Exactly. The UPSL doesn't care about this team. Nobody outside of the organization. And look, to the people who run Coptic Nashville City, I know you all are busting your butts and you're doing everything you can to boost up this team and to boost up the UPSL and to really make this team something. But we as a Kentucky, Tennessee Premier Division, the city of Nashville, that region of the state and country deserve better. So I actually want to throw this part out to the UPSL. I want to help you all get other cities in Kentucky and Tennessee involved that could be potential teams in the league. So if you're looking in Kentucky, and hold on, I got to take another sippy sip. You've got cities like Owensboro, Moorhead, Pikeville. Those are cities that have good population centers. They have the facilities to host teams. Why don't we work with them to help build something? If you really want to make this a cross-Kentucky, cross-Tennessee conference, those are some cities that we need to look into about working with, getting additional expansion teams with. And, with Lexington getting the USL team, I believe that's set to start next year in 2023. Why not bring their second-tier team into the division here? And if you switch gears now to Tennessee, they have an overwhelming abundance of cities that could host teams. Starting with Memphis. I mean, there was that team last year, I believe it was We United, that was from Memphis, that made it either all the way to the semifinals or finals in the same division that we're in this year. So why can't we have a new team in Memphis? Why can't we have a team in Chattanooga? I know Chattanooga's got a rich history of an NAIL team, or NASL. Sorry, I'm getting my sports terms confused. But let's put a second tier of their team in the UPSL. Let's look at Johnson City, Knoxville, Gatlinburg, heck, Bristol, just to name a few. All of these places could have potential UPSL, Kentucky, Tennessee teams in it that could bring in some additional fans, bring in new markets, expand the region and the scope of this conference. So I really want the UPSL to look into those places and try and help develop something there as opposed to having Coptic Nashville. And, when I was talking about Kentucky, I specifically didn't mention Louisville. And I did that for a reason because, from my understanding, starting next year, Metro Louisville, which is who BGFC played in our very first preseason, our only preseason match, they will actually be joining the Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division next year. So, for a team that won a national championship at their previous conference that they were in to jump into ours, this is going to make things even more spicy when it comes to teams in Nashville playing a team like Metro Louisville. But that's all the time I want to spend on those non-playoff teams. We've already spent a lot of time on them, but that'll probably be the last time we talk about them this year. So let's now transition to talking about the teams that did make the playoffs. Again, there are still some matchups and some things that could change. However, for right now, this is what I know. Number 1 seed, Beeman United. They will play the winner of the 4-5 matchup, and that game is scheduled for Saturday, June 18th, down in Murfreesboro, where Beeman is headquartered. Now, that 4-5 matchup, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Right now, it is Deportivo and Nashville Knights, and that game is scheduled to be played in Elizabethtown on Wednesday, June 15th. But I don't know if that's going to happen. With Pumas forcing the league to give them 2 additional games to have a chance to make it to the playoffs, Nashville Knights, you got to be sweating bullets. So I really would encourage the Knights to just keep holding on and hope that they can make the playoffs. But I don't know. Then we move to the 2-3 matchup, and that matchup would be between Iterbide and BGFC. I do have some guests here. Michael, do we have any late breaking news about our matchup with Pumas? Yay or nay?
Yeah.
Yes, Michael Swerkos, come on over here. We're going to get this all framed up here. Michael, what is the latest news you got for us?
So we have kind of been thrown a little bit of a curveball by the league here.
You could say that again.
Okay. We are trying to get a squad together within 24 hours. We've kind of been pushed to try to go play in Mayfield tomorrow at 8 p.m.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So Tuesday, June 14th at 8 p.m. in Mayfield, BGFC at Pumas Premier.
Trying to make it happen. It's not officially confirmed. We're trying to get the squad together. We're trying to make sure they barely have enough to play. We are now working on trying to get a squad out there, see if guys can get off work, or even just get there in the first place. So that is the big update, and just to show you how crazy some of this stuff is sometimes. So I will get out of your hair. Keep doing the big stuff.
Man, you heard it there. Tomorrow night. Well, by the time this goes out, the game should have already happened. But, that could be huge. And even if BGFC goes in there and takes an L, we are still in third place. There's no way that we can be budged out of third place. Now, if we win, thank you, Michael, that would give us a chance at second, depending on. So, Michael, shout at me from across the room here. Sure. Is Iterbide also going to have to play Pumas?
They play them on Thursday.
On Thursday? Are you kidding me? So, if Pumas goes in there and beats Iterbide, this time in Mayfield, then your Bowling Green Golden Lions will slot right into second, and we will host next Saturday against Iterbide again. Whoa. Y'all, I ain't trying to make this up. And I'm looking at all the cameras for the video people. This is not something that we staged. This is literally all breaking as we are doing this. Yes, a decision day, unlike any other in the UPSL. Gotta love the Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division. So, with that, I'm just looking at our time here. We are pushing the limits of today's podcast, so I want to kind of start wrapping things up here with the last few notes. So, as you heard, tomorrow night, Tuesday, June 14th at 8 p.m., BGFC versus Pumas. No real impact on us unless we win. Then Thursday night, Iterbide versus at Pumas. Again, nothing really changes unless they lose, or if they win, they would have 25 points and Iterbide could jump up to first place. So everything that I just said about, who's in first through third could completely change based on some results this week. So we'll just see how it goes, fans. But with that in mind, a couple of things. As a reminder, BGFC Weekly, we are still looking for that full-time podcast sponsor. We might have somebody lined up for the next couple of weeks to be a temporary sponsor, but we are still looking for that full-time sponsor. I know that some of the people that I've reached out to previously are watching the videos. Please, come on now, y'all. It's not that much. If you want to negotiate the deal, please respond, and we'd be more than happy to work with you. We just want to continue to help to see this podcast and this platform grow to as big as it can. Remember, we are back onto our regular weekly schedule now. We will be back next week with a review of what in the world happened this week between BGFC, Pumas, Iterbide, Beeman. Everybody in the top three is involved and could be impacted by this. So please make sure you come back next week. Please make sure you like, rate, comment, subscribe to this video and to this podcast. And I'll see you all next week. I am so excited. This has been the news that I've been waiting on all day. But we will see you all next week on BGFC Weekly.